Hello everyone, how are you all doing? Yeah, woo! Exactly, it's exciting today. We've got 2 days of action-filled, super open source. The numbers are off the charts. I don't know if you've kind of been following this. 300 people have registered on the site, which is fantastic. In fact, we had to close the registration site down 2 days early. There are, I believe, 60 speakers over the next couple of days, 12 demos, 9 breakout sessions, and a whole bunch, of course, interesting discussions and presentations. And what's really cool about this, of course, is the energy you guys are bringing, so thank you all for being here. But what's really cool is that so many of you have come from different countries around Europe and beyond. So I'm going to give a list. I've got them written down here. We've got Germany. So anyone from Germany? Yeah! Oh, wow, look at that. We have Switzerland. Woo! Italy. Yay! Poland. At the back there. Finland. Yes. Sweden. Yes. Belgium. Yeah. UK. I know that. Wow. Okay. Hello. Netherlands. Yeah. Greece. Spain. You guys are there. I know it. Israel. Well done. And am I missing anyone? Yeah, France. Okay, so, it's really cool. And I think that's one of the important things, it's one of the important messages we're going to have over the next few days, is how open source is bringing people together. I know we're kind of in a time at the moment where there's a certain tendency for sort of national retrenchment, closing of borders and all this kind of stuff. And isn't it fantastic that OW2 and open source and the ideals open source brings is really cutting across borders, cutting across cultures, and bringing people together in this open dialogue and open collaboration. So you guys are all part of this open movement, so well done to everyone being here. Now, we're of course proud to be hosting this event. It's the 7th time since 2012 that Orange has hosted the OW2 annual conference, and it means a lot to us to do this. Orange has, for many years, been implicated in open source, been active in open source. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of developers who are working on open source projects on a daily basis. Now, many of these projects are maybe not so visible. They are core technologies, but they're projects and they're teams that, of course, with you, are also changing and helping to shape what we do today and what we do tomorrow as a digital society. So we look at virtualization of telco networks, virtualization, of course, of server infrastructures. We look at 5G. We think of IoT and connected devices, artificial intelligence, chatbots, and that kind of stuff. And, of course, a whole lot more. So really, open source is driving the forefront and the frontiers of the industry of tomorrow. And I think that's something really quite incredible and quite exciting to see. One of the things, of course, that we're doing is working on these technologies with partners and organizations around the world, whether it be organizations such as the Telemanagement Forum, TMF, or ETSI, or the Linux Foundation, or Cloud Foundry, or the Eclipse Foundation, or OpenStack, or, of course, OW2. So I have to hold my microphone higher, apparently. So Orange is proud, of course, to be hosting the OW2 conference and to be involved in open source in such an active way. But what we see is that take-up within industry is not even, it's heterogeneous. And this is because, of course, there are a number of concerns linked with open source. Not everyone is still convinced. I don't know why, they should be. But there are a number of concerns. If we look at compliance, we know that license complexity is not easy. It has to be managed. We have to manage risk around that. If we look at business and revenue models, they're impacted by open source. And of course, then there's the complexity of some companies adding on common clause and things like that. So, you know, there's these questions which people are starting to ask increasingly around open source. And we're looking at the maturity and market readiness of open source, and how do we evaluate that? How do we know that the open source we're using is ready to go to market or ready to be used in our own infrastructures? How do we look at the problem of open source funding in the terms of maintenance, reliability, security, developer compensation? Many developers working for companies, but many developers don't. Community engagement and growth. There's a whole host of questions around open source that we're still looking to tackle, and we're still trying to tackle. So open source is not obvious. And I think this is another key message I really want to point out today, is that for me, it takes work, it's an effort. Oh, yes, it's a passion for many of you, but it's not obvious. It's a change, it challenges our cultural, again, I have to stick it to my chin. It challenges our cultural and our traditional way of thinking within the industry. And this doesn't happen by accident. And what surprises me is, despite having clear benefits, whether it's cost efficiencies or accelerating innovation, or of course leading to digital sovereignty, it's still a surprise to see so few companies promoting and pushing and managing open source in a deliberate fashion. Many projects are doing open source, many companies are working on open source, but fewer have open source program offices or governances or head of open source, or whichever title you want to put on that. And that's something we see more in Europe than in the US. So I think for all of you guys, and people, girls as well, of course, that are coming from Europe, that's something that maybe we should tackle and we should think about. And that also brings me to my next and last slide, because I'm meant to be quick. I'm not meant to really be doing a keynote. Is, of course, it's a great pleasure to see so many of my industry peers here today. Many of them are doing keynotes this morning. So Deutsche Telekom, Ericsson, Nokia, Siemens. We have IBM this afternoon. I know Wipro tomorrow. So, and of course Orange today. So that's fantastic. So thank you guys, thank you everyone from industry for being here and traveling to be here today with us. I think it shows and reinforces the role and the importance that companies are placing on open source. I think it shows the role Orange has within the open source dynamic, and of course, more importantly, I would say, the role OW2 has within that European dynamic of open collaboration. So again, thank you all for being here today. Enjoy your 2 days. Got loads to show you, loads to talk about. I'm going to have an enormous pleasure speaking with as many of you as I can over the next couple of days. And enjoy. Welcome.
Good morning, everybody. It's always a pleasure to be here for the OW2 conference, which is, I think, the most important day of the community in the year. I remember when I first met the OW2 community, I was just wondering, what is this organization about? It is a company, an association, and I didn't know. I have to say now, many years later, defining OW2 is still an ongoing process. But at the end, I feel like this conference is maybe what's defined the best OW2. It's a meeting of people, developers, decision makers, businessmen, project officers, which wants to share values, share code, share ideas, share best practices. And our values, of course, as an open source organization, they are defined simply. We want our users to be free of using our software, to copy them, and so on and so on. You know the 4 freedom of the free software. These people, the community, has common objectives too, which is develop the organization, growing the community, and sustain an ecosystem. Not only the project, but the company around, making the project live and vibrant. Speaking of which, I want to say some few words about what happened in the last year in OW2. We have welcomed 3 new members, 3 new corporate members. We have welcomed more than 100 individual members, and now we are more than 2,500 individual members. The code is growing. We have welcomed new projects in the code base. And thanks to that dynamic, OW2 is now recognized as a major European open source community with a global footprint, as Christian said. We come from a large number of countries here, not only Europe. This acknowledgement as an open source, a major open source community, allowed us to push our values to public administrations. For instance, along with the Free Software Foundation Europe, we have pushed the public money, public code campaign to push administration to give money to open source projects. The latest project, which was awarded in 2016 as best quality project, has been deployed in major cities in the world, like Baltimore, if I'm correct. And we are involved also in many European research projects where the role of OW2 in dissemination is widely recognized. So it has been a good year for OW2, and it's a pleasure for me to make a point on this. And now I want to let Cedric speak about the future of OW2, especially with the market readiness level he will present, which is an important milestone for our community. And before that, I want to thank everybody which participated in the organization of the conference, of course the management office, Orange, which hosts us. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you, Jean, for this introduction, and thank you all for being here today. I'm here just to share with you some housekeeping announcements. And the first one will be to explain the theme of the conference this year. For several times I've explained that open source is not or free software is not something that is monolithic, and that people need to understand and open the hood and look and see what's inside. So our vision of the evolution of open source is of 3 layers. Of course, because of the screen, I have to put the layers in vertical, but think as clothing layers instead of an architecture layer anyway. So the first layer is something that started in the early 80s with Richard Stallman sending this mail saying he's going to develop a non-Unix operating systems, etc., and then went on to define the freedoms of open source, the freedom to use, read, modify, and redistribute the code. And that triggered the whole free software movement, and that was driven by the individual aspirations for recognition and for some ethical values, post-1968 values of sharing the code, etc. So that's what we call the first layer, which is open source or free software by developer and for developers. And then in the middle of the 90s, something happened, and for some reason, free software became commercial open source. And commercial open source became a market entry strategy by followers who attacked the positions of the proprietary vendors by leveraging market segments that were already more or less mature, and they managed to, well, literally make some of these big companies disappear. I mean, one of the company we had in France, Business Object, literally was acquired because it was, very seriously and deadly challenged by open source competitors. So that's the entrepreneur layer. We call that entrepreneur layer. And much debates were between free software and commercial open source. We're not going to get into that. So that's the 90s and the turn of the 2000. And then something happened in around 2010 with internet and cloud computing and everything related.
And it was no longer possible for one company to sell and to actually satisfy a business need, and everybody had to work together, and everybody had to work and evolve in a pack. And the main risk for large companies were to take the wrong direction, while everybody else was going that way. If you make the wrong decision, technology decision, you might invest money into something that you could not get out of and lose all your money. Think VSH, Betamax, think Minitel Internet. So you really want to be moving along with everyone. And that's what I call the ecosystem layer. And you've had organizations that sprung out of this need for sharing information, for making sure that we all have the same information, and we're developing technologies that could complement each other. The best example we had is probably OpenStack Foundation. That really was a proactive move to actually put people together and work on defining a technology. But all the foundations that have appeared over the last few years really are a response to the same need, which is we need to share the information and make sure that we develop all the same technology. So that's what I call strategic commoditization, because instead of developing monopolistic positions with premium prices, everybody wanted to share the same product, same technology, even if it was at a lesser price, but at least you would not lose your investment. And of course, open source was the vehicle to drive this collaborative innovation. It's easy to work together with open source software without having to deal with negotiate intellectual property and have all the lawyers in the middle. So these were the three layers we've been living with, and literally OW2 strives on this. And then something happened last year. With the $1 billion takeovers, we realized that, in fact, open source was becoming mainstream and was becoming towards industry maturity, hence the theme of the conference this year. So what happened is that, well, you have to think that with the Microsoft spending $7.5 billion to acquire GitHub, and IBM committing $35 billion to acquire Red Hat, it means that at some point, board members, people who don't care about open source or technology, well, they may care about technology, but open source necessarily not, who represent pension funds, insurance companies, investment companies. These people have authorized executive teams to actually shop around and commit billions of dollars in acquisitions. So that means that now open source is really part of the industry. It's part of investment, and everything is being monetized, and it's all questions about profitability. So that's where we are now. And I think we got the whole picture. And what we do at OW2, well, we try to thrive across these different layers. Because it's not one layer, or it's not one phase that replaces the other. It's everything combined. And some of our companies, some of our members belong to one or the other, or a couple. And some of our projects are maybe in the middle. But this is the framework we have in mind, where we think about open source, and hence the theme of this year. And this is why we have a incredible lineup of keynote speakers by very large companies.